Losing a friend while on bad terms with them has got to be one of the most unimaginable feelings. The same has to apply to rappers who obviously have feelings like anyone else and continuously lose people. So there's two of the most influential names within hip-hop, Snoop Dogg and Tupac, reportedly had a heated encounter prior to Tupac's passing. And after all those years, Snoop was finally ready to tell his part of the story. Pac and Snoop Dogg were dominating in the 90s. Sadly, while we had a chance to see Snoop's career grow and prosper, the same can't be said about Tupac, whose life was tragically cut short by a gunman back in September of 1996. Those two legendary rap figures have a ton of collaborations, iconic pictures, and wild stories together.
What happened was, Nas ain't got a lot of people with him, but he got a lot of people with him, if you know what I mean.
They're surrounding.
Well, right.
Got it.
And I'm seeing them and I'm knowing, because I'm a gangbang. I'm seeing with their hands on their guns. Tupac got the whole death row we riled up. I step away from it.
And it's no secret that they were actually close friends behind the scenes.
Like in the studio, trying to get some stuff done, or...
You know what? My people from Death Row, they took me out of town, you know what I'm saying? To release my mind. That's something I really needed, you know what I'm saying? I had fun in the water. I went to the water, I was in the sky, me and Tupac was like 30 feet in the air.
However, pictures and songs alone don't really tell the whole story and depth of their relationship. Thankfully, over the years, Snoop has fully embraced the role of that uncle who tells us, the audience, loads of interesting, high-action stories from the wild times back then and opens up on a lot of personal stuff from time to time. This way, in 2020, Snoop told us a backstory on how he and Tupac met on the All the Smoke podcast hosted by Showtime. When we really started rockin' was before Death Row. That's how we got to Death Row. We really started rockin' when Michael Rappaport was there when I met him at the Poetic Justice Wrap-Up. Yeah, Ricky Harris was the MC or the host that night, and I grew up with Ricky. That's my cousin. When I get to the party, Ricky Harris is there, John Singleton, Janet Jackson, all of the stars and stuff is there, and they got like a DJ booth, and they got a microphone. Then Ricky Harris got to the booth, took a mic, and tried to introduce his cousin Snoop to the audience. At this very moment, someone snatched the mic from Harris and started rapping as if nothing had happened. It was none other than Tupac Shakur. Snoop got frustrated and grabbed the mic back and started performing himself. The mic went back and forth several times between Tupac Shakur and Snoop while they were freestyling, and Tupac went as far as freestyle dissing Snoop's people.
And then they were like rhyming on the mic, freestyling. And then Snoop, and it wasn't like beef, but they were like bad, like they were kind of feeling each other.
Right, we rapped, then we finished, then we walked outside.
But he was kind of going at your people.
Yeah, because I had gangsters with me.
Until both of them just stopped. Thankfully, Laylaw from Above the Law, who was cool with Tupac and Snoop, was there and actually introduced them to each other. After a peaceful smoking session, both men shared their phone numbers, and a month later, Snoop was the one to call Pac to check in on him. They started hanging out after that call, and the relationship started to build up, with Tupac showing Snoop the movie Juice he starred in and giving him a Laserdisc copy of it. That's when Snoop says he fell in love with that dude. Their bond grew progressively stronger, and eventually, during the process of making a soundtrack for the movie Murder Was the Case, Snoop wanted to include Tupac's track Life So Hard and paid him $35,000 for it. At the time, Pac hadn't reached this iconic status that he has now and was a relatively upcoming artist, so Suge Knight wasn't a big fan of the purchase, although Snoop did manage to convince him to put his trust in a legend to be. Sadly, the collab with both Snoop and Tupac's verses has never seen the light of day due to deadlines and production complications. Later on, when Tupac got locked up, Snoop even discussed the possibility of getting Pac out of prison with Suge Knight. "We need to get the cuz out and put him up with us, because he'll make us better and he gon' push me, and he's what's hot." The rest is history, and still to this day, Snoop tells even more stories about his friendship with Pac and how influential he really was in his life path. In 2020, Snoop told us about a valuable lesson he learned from being close to Pac. "I think what I learned from Tupac was basically a different kind of work ethic. I always had a good work ethic about myself as far as being timely, being on point, and being a professional. But he just showed me how to be a little more faster at it as far as getting to the meat of it all and not really just listening to it all the time. Not absorbing it, but more just doing it. And keep doing it and doing it. Let the engineer mix it and master it. Not fall in love with it, but fall in love with the craft of being able to do it and continue to do it." Their power alliances without a doubt impacted the hip-hop scene, and thanks to Snoop being pretty open about their relationship, there are still a lot of things for us to learn about Pac's real identity and character. However, things weren't all that perfect, especially given the heated landscape of hip-hop within the 90s, shaken by the East versus West Coast beef. When things got hot, every single rapper had to pick a side. There was simply no chance to stand aside if you were part of the game during that era, or it was very difficult to do so. But life's not that simple, and sometimes you just can't hate someone because of them being proclaimed ops or on a different coast. This exact thing happened to Snoop Dogg, and it eventually led to a brief falling out between the two. The main issue is that Snoop Dogg, who obviously was a part of the incredibly influential West Coast label Death Row, didn't really have any bad blood with some of the biggest East Coast artists, Tupac's alleged nemesis Biggie Smalls, and P. Diddy. Things got progressively worse when Pac addressed Snoop's views directly, asking him, "How do you feel about Puffy and Biggie?" Snoop's answer was sincere, although it was rather a disappointing thing for Pac to hear. "They're my homeboys. I love them." The atmosphere between the two was a little bit thick after that. Later that evening, Pac sent his man to get his weed from Snoop, something he always did himself. The man Tupac sent to Snoop was a fellow rap artist from Outlawz, Muda, who had just wanted to get back to Pac with the product and not do too much talking. It just didn't sit too well with Snoop, who felt funny about the whole interaction and wanted to clear up the situation. Muda said that Pac ain't gonna come up to the hotel. That evening, Snoop's uncle was with Tupac in the club, and in Snoop's words, there was a Biggie record playing, which Pac furiously snatched off the turntable. He was really wilding out that night and a damn fool. He wanted to trip on me, but he couldn't, but his aggression was towards me. According to Snoop, Tupac took Snoop's kind words about Puff and Biggie as he wasn't down with Pac no more, as if Snoop was side busted, as if Snoop was scared. Death Row looked at Snoop like a traitor. The next day, the Death Row crew got on a plane to LA, and Snoop had to fly with Suge, his homies, and Tupac. Snoop and Pac were sitting next to each other, and in Snoop's words, it was the most uncomfortable ride he's ever had in his life. Pac didn't say a word to Snoop for the entirety of the flight, creating a very weird atmosphere between them. The latter actually tried to start a friendly conversation, although Tupac ignored him completely. This tension even made Snoop sleep with a knife in his hand, a fork in his hand, and just sleep the rest of the ride. He felt like Pac was about to do something to him for his previous words on Biggie and Puff from the rival coast. So when I got out of the plane, we land, he walk out, I got a Rolls Royce, he got a Rolls Royce, he walked down the steps, I walk down the steps, we meet right here, and I'm like, "Cuz, you going to Vegas?" He does like this. That was the last time Snoop Dogg saw his friend alive. The next day, Snoop's phones, pagers, and basically all other means of communication available to him at the time were blowing up with texts and voice calls like, "Yo, come on, open the news. Turn on your TV right now." All of those messages were about a young man, aged 25, who was shot on September 7th, 1996 in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas, Nevada. That was Tupac, Snoop's close friend and one of the greatest rappers of that era, according to millions of fans around the globe. Snoop, the Death Row crew, and others drove to Nevada to see Pac and Suge, who also got shot with Tupac. They visited Suge's house first, and he told Snoop everything that happened that day. Suge told Snoop that Pac got shot 9 times, but he thinks he'll make it and be alright. However, when Snoop and the crew got to the hospital and saw Pac's condition, they weren't so sure about it. He got tubes, and I mean, it's like, when I walked in, I just feel like he wasn't even there. And I fainted, Snoop said. He felt completely gone, and to make matters worse, the situation between him and Pac was really getting to his head.
Because me and my homie wasn't straight. You understand what I'm saying? It's like, I'm not even gonna be able to apologize to him, or even just to tell him, "I feel you, I'm wrong," or whatever. We never got that day, and that's the way it ended with me and him, to where he passed away.
Pac's mother got Snoop up for a conversation and tried to cheer him up and not to worry about her son, as he was a true warrior and always was strong throughout his life, and now she wanted Snoop to show her son the same attitude. She asked Snoop to fix himself up and go back to Pac and talk to him. Tupac's mom told Snoop that her son loves him, even despite all the tension those two had prior to the incident. Snoop returned and told an unconscious Pac everything he had on his chest, about how much he loves and appreciates him, although sadly, he felt like it was the last words he'll ever be able to say to his friend. Snoop will never know whether Pac got to hear his sincere words, and that's the part that made Snoop incredibly sad even to this day. That's like the only relationship that I have like that, where someone left and we wasn't alright like we should have been. Even though there's probably no way for Snoop to deliver his message to his fallen friend anymore, The legacy of the two still lives in Snoop's incredible stories, countless interviews, and clips of the two on stage together that many find heartwarming to reminisce on. It's difficult to think of what Tupac's thoughts were in his last moments when in relation to Snoop Dogg, but given the bond he and Snoop had prior to their discord, it's unlikely that he felt anything but love for his close friend who shared so many moments with him and assisted him. And while it may not be enough for Snoop to let the situation he had with Pac go prior to his passing, he did eventually get his chance to share a scene with his friend once again back in 2012, for the last time ever. It was the first hologram that was being played.
Hey yo, Pac, let these motherfuckers know what kind of party they in right now.
Ain't nothing but a gangsta party. You done put two of America's most wanted in the same motherfucking place at the same motherfucking time. Gangsta party. Y'all niggas about to feel this. Break out the champagne glasses.
Snoop was the one to induct Tupac into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2017, a monumental accomplishment, and probably the most powerful way to show one's appreciation to not only a fellow rapper, musician, but a friend in the cold-blooded world that was the rap game in the 90s.